Chapter 9. I believe that for his escape he took advantage of a flight of migrating wild birds. On the morning of his departure, he set his planet in good order. He carefully swept out his active volcanoes. He had two active volcanoes, which was very useful for heating up breakfast in the mornings. He also had an extinct volcano, but as he used to say, one never knows, so he swept out the extinct volcano too. If they are well swept, volcanoes burn slowly and steadily, without erupting. Volcanic eruptions are like chimney fires. Here on Earth we are, of course, far too small to sweep out our volcanoes, which why they cause an endless trouble. With the feelings of sadness, the little prince then uprooted the last little shoots of baobab. He was thinking he might never return here, and one this last morning the familiar task all seemed very precious to him. So that when he watered his flower for the last time and prepared to place her under her glass dome, he found that he was on the verge of tears. "Goodbye," he said to the flower, but she did not reply. "Goodbye," he repeated. The flower coughed, but this was not on account of her cold. "I have been an idiot," she said to him at last. "I ask your forgiveness. Try to be happy." He was taken aback by this absence of reproaches. He stood there all disconcerted, the glass dome suspended in mid-air. He could not understand the sweet composure of hers. "Yes, yes, of course I love you," the flower said to him at last. "You had no idea, which is my fault. It is of no consequence. But you have been as foolish as I. Try to be happy and leave the grass alone. I don't want it anymore. But what about the wind? My cold is not as bad as all that. The cool night air will do me good. I am a flower. But what about insects? I'll simply have to put up with 2 or 3 caterpillars if I want to meet some butterflies. I have heard that they are very beautiful. Otherwise, who will visit me? You will be far away from me. As for wild animals, I am not afraid of them. I have my claws." And she innocently showed her 4 thorns. Then she added, "Don't hang about it. It's irritating. You've decided to go. Now go." For she did not want him to see her tears. She was such a haughty flower. Chapter 10. He found himself in the vicinity of asteroids 325, 326, 327, 328, 329, and 330. So he started by visiting these to find some occupation and to educate himself. The first was inhabited by a king, clad in purple and ermine. The king was sitting on a very simple yet majestic throne. "Ah, here comes the subject," exclaimed the king when he caught sight of the little prince. And the little prince said to himself, "How can he recognize me when he has never seen me before?" The little prince did not realize that for kings the world is very simple. All men are subjects. "Come nearer so that I may see you better," said the king, who felt very proud at last to be king in the eyes of somebody. The little prince looked around him quickly for somewhere to sit, but the entire planet was taken by the king's magnificent ermine robe. So he remained standing, and because he was tired, he yawned. "It is contrary to etiquette to yawn in the presence of the king," said the monarch. "I forbid you to yawn." "I can't help myself," replied the little prince, quite abashed. "I have had a long journey and have not slept." "In which case," said the king, "I command you to yawn. It is years since I have seen anyone yawning. Yawns are to me an object of curiosity. Hurry up, yawn again." "That is a command." "Now I feel intimidated. I can't just at the moment," murmured the little prince, going very red in the face. Replied the king. "In that case, I command you sometimes to yawn and at other times too." He murmured something and seemed put out. For what this king fundamentally insisted upon which his authority be respected. He would not be tolerated disobedience. He was an absolute monarch at the time. Since at heart he was a very good man, he made his comments reasonable. "Were I," he would often say, "were I command a general to change into a seabird, and were this general not to obey, it would not be the general's fault. It would be my fault." "May I sit down?" the little prince now inquired timidly. "I command you to sit down," replied the king, majestically drawing on a fold his ermine mantle. The little prince was astonished. This planet was minuscule. Over what precisely could be king said to Rin? Sire, he said, I beg to be excused for asking you a question. I command you to ask me a question, the king interjected hurriedly. Sire, over what do you read? Over everything, replied the king with huge simplicity. Over everything? With a quiet gesture the king indicated his planet, the other planets, and all the stars. Over all that? Asked the prince. Over all that, replied the king. For not only was he an absolute monarch, but he was a universal monarch. And do the stars obey you? Naturally, said the king. They obey promptly. I do not tolerate indiscipline. The little prince marveled at such power. Had he wielded it himself, he'd have been able to sit and watch not nor 44 senses in a single day, but 72, even 100, even 200, without ever having moved his chair. And since at the thought of his little forsaken planet, he felt himself becoming sad, he plucked up courage to ask the flavor of the king. I would like to see a sunset. Do you mean that kindness command the sun to set? Or I command the general to fly from the one flower to the next like a butterfly, or write a tragedy, or to change into a seabird and were this general not to carry out my command, which of us would be in the wrong, he or I? You would be, said the little prince firmly. Correct. One must require of each what each is able to give, continued the king. Authority rests first of all upon reason. If you command your subjects to go throw themselves into the sea, there will be a revolution. I have the right to demand obedience because my orders are reasonable. And my sunset? The little prince reminded for him. He never forgot a question once he asked it. You shall have your sunset. I shall insist upon it, but I shall wait, in keeping with my science of government, until conditions are favorable. When will that be? Inquired the little prince. Replied the king, consulting an outside element. That will be that'll be this evening at around 20 minutes to 8. Then you shall see how I'm obeyed. The little prince yawned. He was regretting his missed sunset, and he was already beginning to be a little bored. I have nothing further to do here, he said to the king, so I'll be on my way. Don't leave, replied the king, who was very proud of having a subject. Don't leave, I shall make you a minister. Minister of what? Of a justice. But there is nobody here to judge. We do not know for certain, said the king. I have not yet made a complete tour of my kingdom. I am very old. There is no room here for a stagecoach, and it tires me to walk. But I have already looked, said the little prince, bending again to glance around the other side of the planet. There's no one over here either. In that case, you shall judge yourself, replied the king. That is the most difficult thing of all. It is far more difficult to judge oneself than to judge others. If you succeed in judging yourself correctly, then you are truly a man of wisdom. But I can't judge myself anywhere, said the little prince. I do not need to live on this planet. Said the king. I do believe that somewhere on my planet there is an old rat. I hear him at night. You may judge this old rat. From time to time you will condemn him to death. Hence his life will depend on your justice, but you will reprieve. You'll reprieve him each time, so as to save him up. He's the only one we have. But I don't like condemning to death, said the little prince. And I really do think I should be going now. No, said the king, having completed his preparation, but with no wish to distress the old monarch. The little prince said, if your majesty wishes to be obeyed promptly, he might give me a reasonable command. He might, for example, command me to leave without the next minute. It seems to me that conditions are favorable. As the king made no reply, the little prince hesitated. Then, with a sigh, he looked and he took his leave. I make you my ambassador, the king cried out hurriedly after him. He had a wonderful air of authority. Grown-ups are very strange, the little prince said to himself as he continued on his voyage.